Bad news, there is something seriously wrong if you're at below $20,000 a month and you cannot take on new clients. If you're a B2B consultant and you're stuck at below $20,000 a month and you believe that you simply do not have the bandwidth to take on new clients, then watch this. This video is going to be for you. And I've been in this place for almost 2 years. And today I will tell you what to fix so that you don't have to stay there for such a long time. Because there's a good chance that you're stuck in 1 out of 4 traps. And I'll tell you how to diagnose which trap you're in and how to get out of it. My name is Michael Bohannes and I help B2B consultants build scalable client acquisition systems and stop depending on referrals. And as usual, let's go over to Google Docs so that you can read along as I'm speaking. So what is at the bottom of situations like these? How do people end up in these dramatic dead ends where they are below 20K a month and they cannot scale beyond that? Well, it's because they have encountered one or more of the 4 horsemen of the B2B consulting apocalypse. And the first one is the niche offer problem. If you're too broad, you just simply won't go anywhere. This is the problem in the majority of cases. Example, I recently spoke to a consultant, let's call him Phil, whose value proposition is to help startups and SMEs get on the path towards growth. Right? He might as well have said, I solve business problems, right? It's just insanely broad. Based on this definition, he's as proficient at solving warehouse logistic problems for food and beverage wholesalers as he is running TikTok ads for cosmetic firms, right? It's just, of course, no one can be that. So through this label, he's practically advertising his extreme generalism and thus his very low rates. And so how to diagnose if you're in this trap? There's no clear 100% certain figure, but generally I would say if your niche is significantly over 200,000 people in the world, you're probably too broad. Okay. And then also your offering must be confined to a specific skill set, right? So if you're running Facebook and TikTok ads, you're already too broad. Each of these allows you to build a $1 million business. So just focus on that. Once you're at million with one value proposition with one, let's say, platform, Facebook or TikTok, then you can add the other one. Okay, but don't do it before that. Even more so if you offer consulting in both marketing and operations. That's way too broad. I mean, you could argue maybe you could do Facebook and TikTok ads at the same time. That's okay. But just, I know people who are doing consulting in marketing as well as operations. And it's like, it's impossible that you're good at either one of them in that case. Okay, now how to fix it? Just watch this one video about niching. I know it's a little bit boring to niche down. You might think that you're leaving money on the table, but believe me, you are not. You are leaving money on the table if you're not niche down. And this video, why B2B consultants must pick a niche to hit 6 to 7 figures, is the solution to that. So please watch that. That was the first horseman of the B2B consulting apocalypse. The second one is the value delivery problem. Now, this problem is complex and usually manifests in you having an extremely low effective hourly rate from your work. I recently spoke to a consultant who was working 60 to 80 hour weeks and his business was at about $200,000 a year. And he had 3 full-time staffers who needed to be paid. So his own take-home pay was something around $50,000. And so his effective hourly rate was, believe it or not, $14 an hour. Now, there are several root causes of this pain point, and they are as diverse as people are. For example, I've sort of classified them into the main buckets. And that is, number one, using an oxen plow in the 21st century. Now, I recently watched a documentary of Bhutan where a family was still using a plow drawn by 2 oxen, i.e. that's technology that's tens of thousands of years old, to plant rice. And consultants are in this trap when they sell so many different things that they are extremely inefficient at activities that a specialist is able to do in 1/10 of the time. For example, hiring virtual assistants to do cold email personalization when ChatGPT is now much better at this. Problem number 2 is you're unfocused, right? Constant task switching, being completely disorganized, etc. The next problem is that you may have overhired, right? That was clearly very much the case of the guy I just mentioned. He had 3 full-time staffers at a yearly revenue of 200K, which is way too low to have any full-time people at all, right? You should at most have a part-time virtual assistant in the Philippines at that revenue level. And this problem often comes from a certain level of ego and pride. Now, I don't know about the guy I mentioned, but it could very well be that he believes that some activities he'd be doing for clients are beneath him. And so he hires people to do that work for him, or he just wants to scale prematurely. And he does all of that before he's overwhelmed with client demand. The rule is only hire when you are completely maxed out. You're working 80 hours a week and you're stacking up cash, and then you're able to carve out a few activity chunks to relatively low paid virtual assistants. With the newly won back time, get new clients, keep stacking cash and outsource more and more. That is how you scale a consulting business, not by just starting out and hiring 3 people, just to take the lower value tasks off you. It does not work that way. It's a very bad idea. Okay. Another sub problem of the second horseman is you don't think in systems and processes. There simply needs to be something of a conveyor belt that you put your clients on. You do X with them, then Y, then Z, right? And ideally you batch activities together so you can context switch as little as possible. And as you go, you identify more and more activities that you can outsource to lower skilled staff. And the next one is, because you are too broad and everything is a custom tailored suit, you end up creating everything from scratch for each client. And there's not a lot of transferable assets between clients. Like one playbook you deliver for one client, you cannot transfer it to the next one. Right? This often means that while you formally close the retainer for a few hours a week, in reality, you're working probably 3 or 4 times as much as you committed, because you can only close the retainer at a relatively low rate. You say, oh, it's going to be 4 hours a week, but in reality, it's probably going to be 15 hours a week. And then finally, you possibly undercharging. That is, of course, rather rare. Most people know how much to charge based on industry benchmark, but it is possible. And now all of these problems stem from failing to adhere to a few core principles of B2B consulting strategy and operations. And that is, first of all, you need having a replicable niche service offering that you can execute on. That is the foundation. Again, think selling suits off the rack rather than custom tailoring suits for every client. There needs to be this conveyor belt. And second of all, the main principle that people affected by this horseman have not adhered to is that you need to do everything yourself first. Okay, I mentioned this already, but it's really such an important aspect that it bears repeating. Do it everything yourself first. Document your processes. And once you've built a decent cash cushion, hire people to do specific activities that you have formalized and codified in SOPs. And don't just hire somebody full time. Like really get somebody to just take for the one client that you have and make sure that this one client is being served well. And if it means that you can only outsource 5 hours a week, then fine, get somebody to do 5 hours a week. Can be a bit more difficult if it's higher skilled work, but in the end, you should not be outsourcing higher skilled work. That is the thing you keep to yourself. Start with the low skilled work. You outsource that first. Okay, so hire them on a contractual basis only, no full-time employees. And that way you will have full control over what's happening and you can let them go again in case you hit a snag in your business, right? If you lose a client, hit a snag in your business. Early stage consulting businesses are very volatile. And if you have 4 retainer clients and 2 of them suddenly cancel on you, you could lose over half of your revenue tonight. So you should never sleep easy on maintaining a high employee fixed cost, especially if you're making less than $500,000, preferably $1 million in revenue per year. I think we should always start from asking, what can I do to scale to $1 million in yearly revenue with only virtual assistants and contractors, while maintaining a minimum 50% margin, preferably 70%. If you start from that point and you engineer your business towards that, it's very unlikely you end up like that consultant I mentioned, who's making $200K a year and 2/3 of this goes directly towards his team's salaries. Now, only because you're making a very low hourly rate does not necessarily mean that you're doing something wrong. It could be that you're still finding your service market fit, i.e. you're in the concierge phase of your business. In that phase, you're working hard to develop a formula that will bring your clients results. And that's great, because in that case, of course, you have to work hard and you should not pay attention to your hourly rate. But if you already have a track record of getting your clients results, and there is a reasonably predictable path towards doing that, and you still have a very low hourly rate, then you're either selling something not very valuable, or you're undercharging, or your value delivery is extremely inefficient. Okay, so how to fix the value delivery problem, horseman? First of all, alarm bells should be ringing if you're making less than $100 an hour for client delivery work. This means that for a client paying you $2K a month, you should be working a maximum of 4 hours a week. And that is not the end point of your consulting business. It's the starting point. Okay. You don't really have a consulting business if you're making less than $100 an hour. And of course, I'm talking about Western Europe and the United States and sort of high GDP countries, right? Of course, it's very different in lower GDP countries. Now, we, of course, want to aim to crank this figure upward over time. But if you don't make $100 an hour to start with, there's a structural problem and we have to fix that first. Then apply this checklist. Is my focus narrow enough? Am I selling one thing to one specific client avatar? The answer must be yes. Okay. I so often speak with people who sell a million different things. You do not have a consulting business if you do vastly different things to different people. So the answer must be yes, or at least you need to be strongly heading in this direction. Then, am I mapping my value delivery process to my clients? Is there a reasonably predictable system to my work with them? Or am I just improvising with everyone? And then, how focused am I? The goal is that every time you deliver value to a client, you're doing this and only this in a focused 2 to 4 hour session once a day. If you have challenges with this, I strongly recommend that you check in with my productivity coach, Jakub Skupieng. I'm going to be linking to his LinkedIn profile from the description. Please check him out. He's helped me a lot to develop the skill of focus. He's made a big difference in my own business, so talk to him. Then, is it possible to scale this, the way I have the business set up now, to 7 figures, applying only relatively minor changes to how value delivery happens? Or will I have to hire very smart people as employees? If yes, go back to the drawing board, because hiring smart people as employees, I'm not saying anybody who's working low skill stuff is dumb, but if you have to pay a very high hourly fee that gets closer to what you are making from a client, that's not a good way to scale. Like, that's the McKinsey model where you hire very, qualified people. Not a good way to do this. Always try the McDonaldization model is much better over the McKinsey model. And I think I just came up with an idea for the next video. With that, let's move on to the third horseman of the B2B consulting apocalypse, and that is the problem of being in the wrong boat. Remember Warren Buffett's quote: "It doesn't matter how hard you row, what matters is what boat you're in." There are some highly particular offers and niches that simply don't lend themselves to scaling. For example, I once spoke to a consultant who delivered custom-tailored marketing plans to billion-dollar revenue, privately held manufacturing businesses. He was the consulting equivalent of a tailor in Savile Row. No doubt high quality, but because he had to do all the work and could only delegate minor tasks, he was chained to this business. He always had to deliver himself. There's no way of teaching somebody to do this work for him. There was just no way he would ever be able to produce off-the-rack suits. Other examples of the wrong boat problem are when your service offering does not pass the critical density test, which is my way of measuring whether you have a chance of getting clients proactively. For example, when you're providing pure strategy advice, that's very hard to sell because it's a classic inner sanctum problem. Companies don't like to let strangers look behind the curtain that much. Another problem is when your target clients are relatively cash poor and you're doing highly specialized work for them. Or when your market is used to paying you by the hour, for example, a voice coach, right? So there's a lot of bad boats that you can get stuck in. Those are all examples of bad boats. And so how to diagnose when you're in this trap and how you can remedy it. Make a plan how within 6 months you can reduce the time you're spending delivering to clients by 80%. And you continue making 10 to 20K a month and keep at least 60% of the revenue as net profit. If this seems impossible, if you think there's no way I could reduce my own involvement in client delivery by 80%, right, and keep at least 60% of revenue as profit, meaning you just outsource it to relatively low paid staff, then you are in this trap, okay? And so what I recommend you do is run the critical density test and ascertain whether your business model is even remotely conducive for proactive client acquisition. And if it isn't, then change it. It'll be painful, but I'd rather have 6 to 12 months of pain changing my business than 2 decades of pain, because it's impossible to go beyond $20,000 a month. And I spoke about the critical density test. What is that? If you want to run the CDT, go and watch this video, which says the ultimate test to see. I'm going to link to it, of course, from the description and the show notes. And there I'm linking to the spreadsheet where you can easily do the test. Okay, so it's a test that I've created so that you can see, is my offer conducive to proactive client acquisition? Can I get beyond referrals by sending cold emails or running ads? If that is not possible, you again are going to be stuck in the wrong boat and you will have a very hard time scaling predictably. And the third step is change the business so that you can scale. Realize that there are 5 sources of scaling any business, and that is skills, people, capital, code, and media. Decide on one of them and then modify the business to suit that source of scale. In consulting businesses, it could be that you develop your skills to a level where you can charge $1,000 hourly rates, right? That is not advisable unless you're so in love with the activity that you wouldn't do anything else, even if people didn't pay you, because competition in that is just fierce. Okay, so skills are a possible way to scale, but I don't recommend them. Then another way to scale is hire lower skilled staff to help you deliver to clients. That's people. Avoid hiring highly skilled people. We covered that now twice. Then create a software tool to support your client delivery, that is code, build a coaching product based on a content portal, media, that is what we have done. This is the Alpha Lead Academy. So we're scaling using media. And there's no real way of raising capital for a consulting business. Some people have raised money. I don't find this a very good way of scaling because the underlying fundamentals of the business don't change and you're cash generating anyway as a service business. So, and if you want to dive deeper into this topic of scaling, I strongly recommend that you watch this one video, what Naval Ravikant taught me about growing a consulting business. And the fourth horseman of the B2B consulting apocalypse is inefficient marketing. Like if the business depends on you for marketing and you're running around like a headless chicken from marketing event to conference, having to constantly press flesh and nurture your existing network, then this will absolutely bottleneck you. And I get it. Consultants are almost genetically wired to rely on their network, right? They're proud of their referral base, right? And to even turn their dependency on referrals into a virtue. But honestly, it isn't a virtue. If your business relies on you for doing the bulk of client acquisition, then you're doomed to never make it past $1 million in revenue unless you're truly exceptional at what you do. And we're talking 0.01 of consultants who get there, right? That's the ones who can then charge $1,000 an hour. Believe it or not, there's very, very few of them. And even then, your client acquisition methods keep you from getting to 8 figures and above. So how do you fix it? Become aware of how poisonous networking is for your growth ambitions. Watch this video where I calculate how networking is holding you back, because there's actually a mathematic formula to this. And then explore alternative avenues of client acquisition. Is it somehow possible that you could get clients using cold emails, LinkedIn DMs, a great content presence, or paid ads? Don't just dismiss this. I get very often when I ask people, no, I don't think cold email wouldn't work for me. Really? Really? Have you tried? Have you tried with somebody who has a lot of experience in cold emails, right? There's a very strong urge to dismiss it out of hand. No, I do rely on my network, only in referrals. Well, really? And so instead, look at it from a first principles viewpoint. Is it humanly possible that one could get strangers to book sales calls with you? Yes, it is possible. And in fact, one of the most effective ways my clients and I use to book 5 to 10 clients a month is cold email. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can use cold email to almost completely automate your call booking and focus on delivery without the stress, oh my God, I need to get clients soon. If there is one video that you can use to scale beyond 20K, it is this one. I'll see you there.